Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Artem Koker Podcast. Today I'm here with Ryan Metz from the Christian Athlete Paradox, and really awesome podcast and an incredible individual. And I'm just super excited to bring you guys this episode to just talk a lot more about athletics, the importance of being an athlete, and how faith plays an integral part in between all of that. So without further ado, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Dude, thanks for having me, Artem. I am stoked to be here, stoked to kind of have this conversation with you and just kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in general, when we kind of like first met, you and your wife were giving a really powerful testimony. And when I heard it, I was really moved by it. And I really love how you dove so deep into the importance of, again, like athletics and faith. And I think athletics in general is such a critical part that I feel like we don't think enough about because it's something that creates character. It's something that creates grit, discipline. And I don't think there's really enough of it, for example, like in our schools as we're growing up. But it really is something akin to almost like having and going through a boot camp. Yeah. And it really sets you up for life because it's something that you have to commit to. It's something that's also a team sport usually for the most part. And it's something that, again, that creates a lot of discipline and character and just helps you throughout life. So I'm kind of curious, like, how did you I guess like early on start in your journey, with being an athlete or just like playing sports, and what kind of lessons do you feel like you also learned from that as we, like talk more about those things?
Yeah. So I've been an athlete ever since I grew up. I started out playing baseball, started out playing basketball, football, all of kind of the sports. But it's interesting. I had a coach one time say this to me, and I thought it's a really good quote. And it says, you never rise to the occasion. You always sink to your levels of training and habits. And so when I started playing athletics and started taking that to heart, you start to realize that you never go to the level to raise to the level of whatever you come into. And athletics in general kind of reveals the difficult times, the adversity. You kind of find out who you are through athletics. And so for me, athletics.
You figure out the worst person that you really are.
Exactly. Like I grew up playing, and I was a pretty good athlete growing up. I always had success. I always was pretty good at whatever I did. And then I got into college, and now all of a sudden you're facing other people that have always had success, have always been really, really good. Yeah. And what I found very quickly was that I was not equipped to not only be this who I meant to be, who I was called to be with what the Lord has for me, but also I wasn't necessarily a good enough player, and particularly in baseball is what I went to college for. I wasn't a good enough player to perform at that level. And so one of the things that it caused me to do was caused me to look back at myself and say, okay, who are you first and foremost? And the answer that I came to conclude was, okay, I'm not a baseball player. Like, God did not create Ryan to be a baseball player. God created Ryan to be a follower of Jesus. And so once I figured out that that was my identity, then allowing me to step into what God has allowed me to do was really when my baseball career started to take off. And it would take kind of just some trial and error, some figuring it out, but finding out that it wasn't about baseball in particular. It was about where my identity lies was a really big change for the game for me.
Yeah. So did you feel like before, when you were, I guess, like approaching, sports, you were thinking of a lot more of like, hey, this great person that I'm trying to become, like all these like levels and achievements that I'm trying to get to, or this, I don't know, like, I want to be successful in college so I can go into the pro leagues and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Was that kind of your mindset? And I guess what eventually made it, what was the pivoting point that made it shift?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I got into college, and right off the bat, I had a broken back, and so, so like,
how did that happen?
So it was a stress fracture. Just kind of overtraining over time happened during my high school season, senior season, into my freshman season, and so right off the bat, like I was battling all of these injuries. I was battling, was I even good enough? Yeah. And so very quickly, I had to kind of figure out who I was, because my identity was being tested right away. After I kind of started putting my faith in the Lord, one of the things that does is that you put your faith in the Lord and you say, God kind of gave me a platform to speak on these things, to say, my identity is in Christ first and then on the field second. And that was great. That was an awesome thing to say. But now it came to living that out. And so when I started to have failures on the field and I wasn't performing to the level that I thought I should be performing, now I had to come back and reevaluate, was I truly rooted in the Lord, or was I still trying to hold on to that little bit of success? And it kind of took me, truthfully, a long time. It took me until my 5th year of college to finally realize that I had to surrender everything to the Lord, surrender all of the success, all of the failure, surrender everything to the Lord before I finally said, okay, God, my life is yours. Do with it what you wish. And when I finally let the Lord kind of through that was when the Lord finally said, okay, now we go. And that was when my athletic career really had my best season. Not because of anything that I did, but because I finally said, okay, like, God, my life is yours. My career is yours. All of this is for you. And when I finally kind of stepped to the side was when God finally was able to work. And I think it's probably so true of everything in life, to be honest. Like when we hold on and grip to something so tight, God doesn't have the space to work. We don't give full control to God. One of my favorite analogies is we're like in the car, right? And so often we say, Jesus, take the wheel, but we don't want to get out of the driver's seat. Or maybe we've even gotten out of the driver's seat and we want to get to
That's what a Tesla is for. You can sit in the passengers, let it autopilot.
But think about it though, even from the passenger seat, like if you don't like where God is taking you from the passenger seat, you can kind of reach over, grab the wheel and redirect. And what I think God really wants for us is to say, like, God, I'm going to get in the back seat. I'm going to go wherever you want to go. And when you tell me to get out and go minister to someone, I'm going to go get out and go minister to someone. I'm going to get out and fulfill my purpose that you have for me when you have it for me. And so I think that was kind of what I came to during my 5th year. I had finally said, okay, God, like, if this isn't what you want for me, so be it. I'll get in the back seat. And that was when God finally was like, okay, now we can go.
That's wild. I think it's very difficult to be able to surrender and let go of your, I guess, like worldly ideas and desires, and just be able to. I mean, it's hard because I think there's so much like pride and ego that are involved in the whole process, and it's also control, because I think especially we as men, right? We want to be able to say it was through my hard work and effort that I was able to achieve this.
Yeah.
And it requires a great amount of humility to be able to say, no, it's actually not me. It's through God. Because I mean, ultimately, I would not even have life if it wasn't for God, and my efforts would be in vain if it wasn't for God. Because again, like, there's nothing that we can do apart from Him. He could snap His fingers, or even just like say a word, or even think of it, and we would all just be ragdolls, right? Mm-hmm. So the fact that we even have all these, opportunities to move, to breathe, to see, it's because of Him. And it's hard though to like keep that at the forefront. And I think you're right also when you were saying that a lot of these things can be applied to different aspects of your life. I think of it more related to me as when it comes to business, right? Yeah. Because I think with business and a lot of entrepreneurs or just businessmen and businesswomen, as they're building stuff up, it's very hard to again give that to God, because it's such a slippery slope too, especially because once you start achieving certain levels of income and success, it can be a very prideful time, and it's very easy to fall off and let money become your idol and be attached to houses and cars and the lifestyle, instead of just continuing to stay humble and also, I think, mission focused on the kingdom.
Well, I think anything in this life God has given to us. So anything in this life can be used for good. Anything can be twisted for evil as well. And like, there are things that are, the Bible is very black and white. The Bible has, this is sin, this is not, but there is still that gray space of what about this? What about money? The Bible does not condemn money as a purely evil thing. The use of money, the love of money, the Bible says is evil, is sinful. And so when we get into these materialistic worldviews, I think that's where it kind of starts to go wrong, is that when we take what God has for us and what God has chosen to bless us with, and now all of a sudden we remove God from it, that's when things start to go awry for us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to expand on the money aspect too, I was just having this conversation earlier yesterday I think if you look at money instead of just, like cash, if you look at it as resources, it kind of flips the idea a little bit, because it really is like some people just have a lot more resources than others. Some people work really hard for them, but at the end of the day, it really is just a resource to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And again, it's a resource that can be used for good, or like you mentioned, for evil, or for things that just kind of lead us down the wrong path. So I think, honestly, like those are such critical and important pieces to keep in mind. And I guess it's a good segue question. Like, how did you, how did you start getting your mindset in that? And how, because again, like making that sacrifice and letting go of that must have been very challenging. It must have been very difficult, right?
I think creating a desire within ourselves is a very difficult thing to do. I don't believe that like we desire to do the right thing. I don't think we desire to do the things that are external to ourselves. I think we are very self-minded, very self-focused. Athletics, another example of that. Athletes, first and foremost, are usually very concerned about themselves. And what that goes to show and how you combat that, I believe, is through a relationship with Jesus. You say, God, I want what you want for me. Like, I want what you want. I want your will. And so it's not necessarily changing your own desires, but rather aligning our desires to what God wants for us. And I think that becomes a possible, that becomes something that's attainable, is to say, God, I want what you want for me, versus God, I want to do the right thing. God, I want to, or even like changing that desire within yourself to say, I want to do this because it's the right thing. Well, why? Yeah. Why do you want to give $10,000 to a charity? Like, what do you gain from that? Just feeling good? Well, maybe for a little bit, but eventually, if push comes to shove and that $10,000 is the $10,000 that you have to eat or the $10,000 that you have to give away, well, that becomes a very clear choice. Like, no, I'm going to protect myself first. But when we trust in the Lord to provide for us, when we trust in what the Lord has for us, now those desires are what get pushed to the forefront, and we trust and submit to that God has what's best for us. And so I think that's kind of how like athletics ended up working for me too, was, God, if on-field success isn't what you want for me, then so be it. I want what you want rather than what I want. And that was a very difficult thing to actually not even master, but to simply just agree upon. Because as soon as we say, God, I want what you want, the enemy is going to throw everything he can at you to derail you from that purpose, because the enemy knows that what God has for us is way better than what we ourselves can do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's absolutely true. What kind of things have you seen in the world of athletics that I guess or kind of like lead people down the wrong path? Because I'm sure you've seen a lot, and you've also talked to a lot of athletes on your podcast. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to where the root of sin lies for all of humanity, and that's sex, money, and power. Yeah. I think I've heard it said that every sin originates from those three wants and desires, basically. Yeah. Want the desire for sex, the desire for money, the desire for power. And I think that
athletes have all three.
Well, that's the thing. Like so many decisions for athletes can be dictated by that. Okay, I want success because I want money. I want the platform because I want power. I want success because I want that girl, or that guy, for, whatever it is. That those three desires, I think, are all three things that on their own and in the right constraints that God has given. Sex is a beautiful thing inside of marriage. Money is not evil if it's used according to God's purpose. Power and influence for the gospel is a good thing. But when we take those outside of God's design, that's when things get corrupted.
Yeah. And I like how you also broke those down. You're like, look, sex, money, and power, but then you like reverse them. Like there's the good side of it as well. Again, if it's, done in a godly way. Do you have, I guess, maybe like any stories of just how people maybe were like going on the wrong track and how they were able to turn around, or I guess like some moral dilemmas that maybe you or other people have faced while they were in those situations?
Yeah, the big one for me that comes to mind right now is the new legislation within athletics, specifically college athletics, called the NIL. And NIL is name, image, and likeness. And what it means is that now athletes can make money based on their name, image, and likeness in their college universities. Collegiate athletics used to be a purely amateur sport, essentially, where you weren't compensated for your performance like you are in professional sports. And what name, image, and likeness has done is I think it's revealed truthfully a selfish route throughout all of college. And so what's happening now is athletes no longer care about the team. Athletes are now transferring schools purely based on a money standpoint. If someone offers them more money, if they think that they can make more money at another school, they're going to flip schools. They're not going to be loyal to the team. And I think that legislation is destroying the root of college athletics. And kind of what you touched on earlier of the podcast is, athletics is meant to bring out some of the best of us, to show us who we really are. And what it's really doing is it's showing the selfish root of athletics in general, I think. And honestly, the selfish root of our culture and our nation in general, I think.
So let me ask you a question. I think you brought some valid points, but do you think that this is any different from actual professional sports? Because, I mean, look, players and athletes, they transfer teams all the time. It's all about, contract and genuinely what's going to serve them the best. And it's not even like a very selfish thing to do, as kind of I see it. It's just like it's just business, right? You're trying to go into the professional side. You want to make sure you're doing the right business moves that make sense for you. And what you do again, with the money, with the influence, and all that stuff, that's a totally separate thing. For me, I just see it as strategy for growth. And it doesn't seem like it's a good or a bad thing. In fact, I don't know. It seems like it's a better place for athletes because they can actually get paid more and they can have a much stronger pathway forward into the professional side. So it seems like it's making it a little bit better.
So I think it comes back down to instant gratification because the reality is that only 2% of all college athletes will go on to play professional sports. So that's 98% of college athletes that will not go on to be professional in something athletic related.
Are the numbers that low?
Yes.
Wow, that's incredibly competitive.
Only 2%.
That's incredible. How many? I'm curious. What's the percentage of people that go from high school sports that get into college sports?
So of all high school sports to college is about 1.9 to 2.1%, so somewhere along those lines. And that's
to 2.9.
And that's D1, D2, D3, NAI. Any college sports from high school is about 2%. So then 2% of that 2% then go on to play professional sports.
That's incredible.
And so what college has done, what college has always been was, hey, come to my school, play sports for me, and we'll give you an education. And that was kind of the basis of what college athletics was a chance to move to professional and play college sports at a high level, but also getting an education. And what I think this NIL has done is kind of moved to an instant gratification. And so people chase the momentary dollar, the momentary money amount that can provide them the most at that time, but they don't focus on the education standpoint. And there's always been that dilemma around college athletics in general because, you've got the dumb jocks. Like that was kind of the mindset. For me, I chose a school based on the degree that I wanted to get. And I chose a degree that was not difficult, was not conducive for me performing on the field. I chose engineering. And so do engineering.
That sounds like it would be conducive, bro. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, to do engineering schoolwork and succeed at it while also playing baseball, both of those are significant time, require a significant amount of time. Yeah. And so if I want to succeed at baseball, well, then I need to add more time to it. If I want to succeed at engineering, I need to put more time to it. Well, you've only got a certain amount of time in the day. And so now you have to kind of find these trades and balances. And so for me, I wanted to perform at the highest level that I possibly could on the field. The Bible says work for man as though working for the Lord. So we are called as Christians to be the hardest workers, and we should be. But when it comes down to knowing what I think God has for me and taking advantage of why I went to that school in the first place, the odds are in my favor to get my degree rather than to be the 2% that go play professional. Not that I didn't want that, but you have to also recognize what are the likelihood, I think.
So what you're saying is, I just want to make sure I understand, is that this new legislation has basically allowed people to have a lot more money in the moment at the bit more of a jeopardy to their actual degree. And you're saying that because if people transfer more, there's a higher probability of them, I guess, like not doing as well in school, but still making money like in the moment. But after they graduate or after that moment passes, they're going to be in a worse off situation. Is that essentially what you're saying?
So I think it goes back to everything in moderation, because the NIL for some people and in some cases has been a great doorway into whether it be professional sports, whether it be into a job after college. Like, I'm not saying that NIL as a whole is bad, but what I think college sports used to be was it used to be an amateur environment for really good athletes to go play while also focusing on the team. It used to be if you transferred, you had to sit out a year. And so now what's happening is that these kids are getting into a school and they're finding out that, oh, I'm not the king of the hill anymore. Oh, I'm not who I thought I was in high school. And so when it doesn't go their way, instead of fighting for it, instead of putting their head down and saying, okay, I'm going to work for this, they dip. They try and find a school that now fits their wants and desires. And I think that that's really bad for the culture of America and the culture of the next generation, because no one's learning to fight for anything and to put their head down and work for something.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think those points definitely make sense. What do you, so going, playing off of that with, fighting for something, having that discipline, not backing down when things get hard, but just putting your head down and doing the work. How do you feel like that's transformed you, maybe like early on in your childhood as you started doing athletics? Because again, I feel like it's something, if you started very early on, it teaches you very valuable life lessons that will help you get through, again, like very difficult points in your lives that everybody will face once they get a little bit older.
Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as like, we had this thing called the Hokie Challenge. So the Hokie, I went to Virginia Tech, go Hokies. But the Hokie Challenge.
No, I'm kidding.
What the Hokie Challenge was it was a grueling physical, it was like a workout, but it was like you ran the stairs of Lane Stadium, then you ran across campus and you pushed a ball up, like a military style kind of workout. And what it really did was it was supposed to create team camaraderie, and it did that. But it was also supposed to be just defeating in general, like just supposed to be really difficult. And I was, from my freshman year to my fourth year, I won it every year. And then my fifth year, I came in second place. I just got old. But one of the things that I loved about that, about the Hokie Challenge in general, was it showed what kind of grit do you have? When things get hard, what do you do? Do you say, all right, I'm just going to finish and just not care about where you compete? Or are you going to actually put your head down and work and grind through it? And I think it's kind of indicative of, there are things in athletics that are going to be hard. You're going to come into a game that's going to put you in a tough spot, and you're going to have to find a way to get through it. But in life, we're going to face things that are so much more difficult. We're going to face things that are so much more real. And I think if we train ourselves to just put our head down and just kind of find a way to get through it, like without really caring about the results, then we put ourselves in a position moving forward in our careers, or when things get hard, to kind of find the easy way out. And in reality, in life, sometimes there just isn't an easy way out. It takes gritting through it and grinding through it. And, I just got married, and now it's putting my head down and working as hard as I can to provide for my family, to provide for my future kids. Like, there are so many more decisions that I, as the male, have to make and to have to accept responsibility for, that I think if we're not careful, the male generation is losing that grit and losing that desire to provide for a family.
So do you so you feel like the lack of that discipline and the lack of I guess like maybe people like doing, let's say, like more sports or just like having maybe even like better father figures or better family is contributing to some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think athletics is like the cause or the root,
The poster child.
Yeah, but I think athletics, in a lot of ways, can kind of shine a light into that. I think our culture is becoming so much about self, so much about me. What can I do for me? What can I do? And what can I get? And I think when we look at the Bible and we look at what Jesus did, Jesus said, no, I came to serve. I came to not to be served, but to serve. And, his example of washing the disciples' feet was one that I think we are meant to model. We are meant to put on the character of Jesus and strive to be like Jesus, knowing that we can never fully attain it. Like Jesus was perfect in every way, shape, and form, and we ourselves are not. So we're never going to fully attain that. But that is the goal, is to be more like Jesus. And that means in every way, shape, and form is putting off of ourselves and putting on Christ.
I love that. And I think there really is a very big need, especially in today's day and age, for discipline, for character, for grit, for hard work, for commitment. And I think there's definitely not enough of that happening in our society, whether it's within our families and how we're raised, whether it's through our fathers or mothers, whether it's through school, maybe not having enough of again, like maybe not enough PE, man. Maybe we just need more of that.
Well, let me put it this way too. Like God's design for marriage was between one man and one wife.
Yeah.
Okay. The divorce rate in America is over 50%.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that shows you is that in 50% of households, there is not a mom and a dad in the house at all times. And that is not God's design.
Yeah.
And so when there's not a man and a wife in the house together raising those kids don't get the proper picture of the nurturing mother, but also a strong father figure. And so for me and you as men, we want to be the strong father figures, and we are called to be the strong father figures to show our kids what it looks like to work hard, to be that example for kids. And I think, just as a byproduct of the way that our culture has gone is that there isn't that father figure in a lot of kids' lives, or not a continual father figure in kids' lives to kind of represent and to show what it looks like to work hard and to grit and to be disciplined and to do everything that you've been saying. And I think that is another example that we as men need to step back up and be the leaders that God has called us to be.
Yeah, I love it. I think all of it, obviously, begins with God, with Christ. And then on top of that, we build a lot of other foundations. And I think one of them is obviously just having really good, healthy families.
Yeah.
Being really good leaders as men, as fathers, as husbands, as just, in whatever part of society that we're working on, just doing our absolute best. I do really like the idea of a lot more athletics. Honestly, I feel like there's another thing that has maybe contributed to US and just the generation being a little bit weaker. And I think that it's a good and a bad thing at the same time. So, and that is basically military. I think it's not mandatory, but I feel like honestly, boot camp and just going through military is almost like a passage to adulthood. And I feel like it's really, really important for both men and for women, because you learn, again, such important skills and values when you go through that. You just learn not only like, patriotism, but also, again, you get stronger mentally, you get stronger physically, you learn more about like camaraderie.
Yeah.
And you just have stronger character. I mean, if you look at Israel, for example, there's mandatory military service for both men and women. And I feel like, again, it's just one of those things that you grow up, you go through that, then you really get pushed and you become like a full-on adult. Then you can go through life a little bit easier. And I think that, not having that in US is a bit of a downside. I mean, there's also an upside in terms of like the government itself cannot be a lot more like pushy with military because they know they just don't have the numbers as much. Because if you had a fully mobilized military and every citizen is ready to go, there would be a very different position. But that's like more of a political question. But I think that would also really help. But just looking back at things that we can control, I feel like just going back to the gym a lot more, like working out, like creating that discipline.
Yeah.
And I really like the idea of sports again, because it's almost like I was mentioning earlier, it's like a mini boot camp.
Yeah.
Right. So you can start creating a lot of those disciplines and characters. So what do you think would be like really good for somebody that is maybe not in the best place in their life, but everybody needs more discipline. Everybody needs a little more character and grit. What would you recommend to them, maybe as far as like sports, gym, athletics, or anything else?
I think habits are built not overnight. That's the first thing. But habits are so important. Not everyone is type A to the point where I need a checklist to go do X, Y, Z. And that's okay. Not everyone needs that checklist, but having discipline is so important. Exactly like you're saying. And so I think for me, the things that I think you see a lot of military people talk about this, and there's a great speech by I think it's an Army captain, but he talks about making your bed. Making your bed, accomplishing that one small task gives you the courage to accomplish the next small task.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it. It's pretty popular now, but if you're not, look up "Make Your Bed" by Army Captain. It's a good video.
Just make your bed, guys. Come on.
But going back to your question about habits and disciplines, I think that can look a lot of different ways. It can look like making your bed. It can look like setting an alarm and getting up with an alarm. I think for Christians, for me, one of the things is I want to be in the Word, and whether that looks like reading a verse a day, a Bible, a passage a day, whatever it looks like, having that discipline to make God the focus of my day is so important. But then, just so many things that can be so simple that like going to the gym, like having habits and discipline doesn't necessarily need to be, I need to restructure my entire life. I think having one habit or discipline then makes a desire for another, and then another. And the next thing over time, next thing you know, your life has changed without necessarily even realizing that you meant to change your entire life. It just starts with that one small desire to say yes to one thing that then turns into multiple things.
I love that. And I think a couple of things that you mentioned there, which I also find very fascinating, is habits. Like you really are the sum of the habits.
Yeah.
And I think habits is really how you grow as a person. And that really also goes back to one of the things we were talking about, which is commitment and discipline. And I think if you can develop the right type of habits, and I mean, I think if we look at science, a habit will take anywhere between like 1 to 2 months, I believe, to like fully develop and kind of become on autopilot. But once you get it, it's like, that's how you grow. And I've noticed that too in business, man, like the habits and the systems that you put in place and the things that you can do the most consistently will be the determining factor of your success.
Yeah.
And I think it's no different in life.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so like we make these habits and disciplines out to be such these big things that we need to do. I need to make some big gesture to show that my life has changed. Like it sounds so dumb, but one of the things that got my day off to a great start was drinking a glass of water first thing when I get up. Like it's such a dumb thing and it's such a weird thing, but drinking a glass of water is almost better than caffeine. It's natural. It hydrates you for the day. It jumpstarts your day. And now all of a sudden, like, oh, I feel good. Like, okay, now I can go to the gym. Or, okay, nice. Now I'm awake enough to read my Bible. Like so many of these big habits that we see others have been built because of something small that was the foundation that led to it. You know what I mean?
I love that. So I'm actually very curious. So I am also a very habitual person, and I also analyze and look at the habits of very highly successful people and what they do. So I'm kind of curious, like what is your, I guess, like average day look like? Yeah.
So my wife and I are early risers, so we have an alarm for 4:45. We get up.
Only 4, man. You don't wake up at 3. Jeez, that's wild. How did you get into the habit of that?
Athletics.
Really?
Yeah, because we used to lift at 6 a.m. And so
y'all are crazy.
Yeah.
6 a.m., bro.
So get up at 4:45, go to the gym, come back. We just got a new little puppy, so my habits have changed a little bit. But get up, go to the gym. I would come back, and I used to read. I used to read before going to the gym. Having a puppy has now changed that a little bit. So come back, pop in some headphones and take her on a walk. And then I'll come back and read, make breakfast, and then I go to work.
Well, what time, how does that look like? So 4:45, you wake up. Are you like snoozing your alarm for like 5 or 10 minutes? Or do you just like, all right, snap it, let's go?
When things are good, I'm not gonna sit here and say I've never snoozed my alarm, but when things are good, up 4:45 and then out the door by like 5:10.
Both of you guys to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Do you guys jog to the gym, or do you drive?
We drive.
Okay.
Yeah. So she actually just got her training certificate, so now she's a trainer. So
okay,
yeah.
Let's go.
So she's a trainer now, and so I've joined her gym, and we go to the gym together. And
which one is that?
It's a thing called Burn Boot Camp. It started out as mainly women, but now it's women and men, and it's
cool.
just a good gym,
Nice.
good workout.
Nice.
But she's gotten a love for that. She's really good at training. And so we go to the gym, and then sometimes she'll work a little bit longer. She'll have like a couple classes she does. So I come back, and then I take the dog on a walk.
Nice.
And I usually come back around 6:30. So 5:30 to 6:30 to the gym.
Okay.
Come back, take the dog on like a 45-minute walk, listening to like a podcast or a sermon or something in the morning. Then I'll make breakfast, read, and then off to work, hopefully by around 8.
Jeez, that is wild. You do so much by 8 a.m.
I'm tired. Like by the time I get to work, like I've been up for what's that, 5 hours?
Yeah.
Or not 5 hours. Wow, I can't do math. Like 3 or 4 hours, and like I'm awake for my job.
That's
and then
crazy.
we go to bed at 9. So like,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. What time do you go?
yeah, like we're tired by the end of the day because we've gotten up early, and
Yeah.
so by the time 9 o'clock rolls around, like okay, let's go to bed.
Man, but there's honestly like such really good habits. I can't imagine waking up that early, but it does sound, I mean, it makes sense. Like if you're going to bed at 9, like, and if you have a good enough routine where you can actually consistently go to bed at 9,
Yeah.
that's really good. So what do you do after work? What does that routine look like? So I'm assuming you finish by 5.
So I'm usually off work by 6.
6?
So I'm off work by 6, and then
Man, 8 to 6, you're putting in the hours.
it's usually like 8:30 to 6 usually.
Okay.
We work 9-hour days. Sometimes it is a little longer, sometimes it's a little less. But come home, we eat dinner, and then normally like our evenings are usually super busy. So like Mondays are young adults, Wednesdays are our church. We have a Bible study, or we help out with high school youth group on Thursdays. And then kind of those days that we have off are just kind of what we want. Sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's taking a slow night.
Yeah. Sometimes just being a couch potato.
Yeah, sometimes like sometimes we're like, hey, we haven't spent time together. Like let's be intentional about our time together tonight. So
I love that. It's so cool. I feel like I'm honestly like by the time the day ends, I'm just like dead. I'm burnt out, and I'm on the couch for at least like 2 hours just to rejuvenate. Then I'll go out for a walk and like hit the gym, and then I'm like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. Like by the end of the night, like I'm like tired. So if I had my way, like I would throw up something on the TV and just like kind of like be a couch potato and be mind numb. But Grace is really good about like reading or like still stimulating her mind. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to get back into is I want to read before bed to continue to grow in my knowledge, continue to grow in that habit.
I think that's one of the hardest things. Like that's one of the habits that I've been trying to build recently too, is reading a lot more versus just like unplugging for YouTube. Because I feel like I think sometimes what you really need is to unplug.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be thinking. I don't want to be analyzing. I don't want to be just like having an outlook on life. I just want to be mindless so that my brain can rest. Because, we're always thinking.
Yeah.
So do you feel like books give you that? 'Cause to me, I feel like it's just more of analyzing and processing.
It is. It's interesting because it depends on the type of book that I want to read. There are some books that are like very dense that I have to be in like a mood for. There's other books that I can read a little bit more freeing. But I do think it, like you're saying, it's really important to give yourself that mental break. But I think And I love this phrase. I heard it from a friend a while back, but it's God made us to work. God made us to be doing things. And so when we rest, it should be with the mindset of rest to work. We shouldn't be working to then rest.
What do you mean by that? Can you say it again?
So because we are made to work, we are made to be busy. God does desire rest.
Just for everyone's awareness, not to be workaholics. Okay, there's a big difference.
Exactly. And God does want us to rest. And you see that talked about all the time in the Bible of we are called to rest.
Yeah.
But we're never called to rest and to stay in that rest. We're called to rest so that then we can go back out and work. And one of the things that I think we can get into the mindset of is, okay, I'm going to work so then I can go rest. So we have rest be the reward, when in reality, rest is something that should rejuvenate us to then go work again.
I see. That's interesting. I don't know if I've thought of it that way. I'm just thinking of rest, man, I burn myself out. I just need a time to chill.
Yeah. Well, and I've struggled with it, whereas I desire rest so much that I then become lazy because I lose those habits.
Do you feel like, though, maybe that's because you don't get enough rest and you're just too busy and you're overworking yourself?
Exactly. I think that's exactly it. I think there's a lack of a balance in my work that doesn't allow me to rest. So that way, when I do get it, I overuse it. And that's where I think we need to be intentional about our rest. So that way, when we do rest, we're ready to then go work again.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's one of the things that my therapist was actually hammering into my head for many, many months and probably years now, which is the art of taking a Sabbath. It's so important to learn how to properly take a Sabbath, which is basically just take a full day off.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I would do is I would be working, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and then I would have shoots over the weekends. So, we would have weddings and events, and I would never really have time to rest. And it would be weird for me to take Monday off, for example, because it was Monday's the start of the week. How can I take that rest? But through time, I've learned it, and I've actually now started to enjoy Mondays and to take them off because of and it's so critical, because if you really if you're just grinding too hard and you don't give yourself proper time to just sometimes even honestly to be bored. Sometimes we need boredom, because that's when a lot of creativity is stimulated.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, when your brain is just so wired to do X, Y, and Z, and you don't give it rest, you don't give it time to just have other ideas and creativity to flow. And that's when honestly a lot of answers can come to us, is when we find rest and when we're not trying to do anything, when we're not trying to be busy, but we just, let things be.
I think that's one of the ways that the Holy Spirit can work through us too. And that one of the ways the enemy can kind of distract us is when we are go, the enemy can keep us busy so that we don't take time to listen to the Lord. And so that Sabbath, that rest, allows us to kind of unplug from everything, to kind of sit back and say, God, what have I not been listening to that you're trying to get my attention on? And I'm not as good about that as I wish I was, but that's a huge thing of giving yourself the ability to sit with yourself, but also to listen to the Lord in it too. Twitter is not the Lord. You know what I mean? Scrolling through Twitter, that is not the way that God speaks to us. I mean, it can be, but
there's some good memes there.
Yeah. No, like I said, everything in moderation.
What do you think? How do you Sabbath?
For me, and honestly, it kind of depends on the day. When my Sabbath is good, one of the things that I love to do is I love to schedule it. So in the calendar, that is my Sabbath. So that way, when you look at your calendar, you cannot schedule anything there because you have that scheduled.
I love that. That sometimes happens with me too. I realize I want to schedule time off, but I never actually make it a schedule thing.
Exactly.
And so the other business gets in the way and it gets in there. And so I realized I need to put my rest into the business calendar just so that nothing else can get in the way.
Right. And you could always be doing something else. There's always something work to be doing. There's always an errand to run. Taking a Sabbath is not saying that there's nothing to be doing.
Yeah.
It is prioritizing that rest. For me, one of the simplest ways is I want to go to a coffee shop and I want to just read. I want to dive into the Word of God. I want to pray. Praying, to be honest, has been one of the hardest things for me, but one of the most rewarding. Taking the time to actively talk to God has been the most rewarding for me, because I feel like that's when He speaks to me.
Yeah, I think First of all, I really like that your place is a coffee shop. I've been thinking a lot more about those types of things too, because I think a lot of times we need to leave the environment that we're in. We need to leave the house because there's just, there might be a kind of like maybe a tension, maybe a stress, maybe like all this other stuff associated with it. And you just need to leave that space and go and feel just different energy around you.
Yeah.
And I feel like, a coffee shop, maybe a library,
Yeah.
maybe just being out somewhere in the park or out in the nature, it could be such a good way to reset. Like last weekend, we had a wedding, and I was shooting a wedding in New York. It was in Albany, and it was a little bit more on the countryside. And I found so much peace. It was very beautiful. We were like filming the getting ready shots, and then their couple shoot at a lake. So they had a house by the lake, and it was like in a woodsy area. And then they actually got into this like little rowing boat. We went. It was so cool, man. I flew the drone there. We filmed them. It was so beautiful, and just being out there gave me so much peace, and it was beautiful. And it reminded me that, man, sometimes you just need to get away from the concrete jungle. Honestly, like we're not in New York, but there's still just, you need to get away from business, from technology, from buildings, and just go back into the raw nature and water too. I don't know, nature and water; those two things.
God's
go hand
creation.
in hand. Yeah. And just there's such a serene peace about it. Just hearing the birds, not hearing an air conditioner going off, or like your computer or radio or noise.
Your phone.
Yeah.
Like every time I Sabbath, I either don't bring my phone or it's on do not disturb. Because it's so easy to it's so natural to like pick up my phone and be like, oh, what have I heard today? What's on Twitter? What's on Instagram? Like your phone, we are so addicted to our phones, we don't even realize it.
Can I give you a tip or a hack?
Yeah.
So this is something that I've learned over the years. So one of the things that I do is I actually always leave my phone on do not disturb. And I did this for a couple of reasons. But I optimize it in a way that I can still see everything. Like the notifications are not just like invisible. So what I practically did was that my phone will never turn on ever unless there's a phone call.
Oh.
Yeah. And so like, no matter what I do, I don't get any like message notifications. I don't get anything unless it's an alarm or a phone call. And what this allows me to do is that the phone does not control me. I control it. And so when I want to check notifications, I check them. And when I don't, I don't. And this allows me to be a lot more productive too. It's honestly like, it was twofold. Funny enough, like my main motivation for doing that was to save battery, just because I realized, it wastes so much battery by constantly turning on your phone or your screen all the time. And I was like, geez, this is just ridiculous. iPhones don't really have the best batteries to begin with.
Yeah.
But so that was the first thing. But then the second thing, you also realize just how much time is wasted when you cannot focus. And when you cannot focus, you just can't get stuff done. When there's constant distractions, it just keeps you from actually like being successful and actually being a lot more efficient and in your day, in your life, just whatever it is.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And that's something I may look into.
Yeah.
I mean, just even like the phantom buzzes that you supposedly feel like.
Yeah, you feel them when you first turn off, dude. After a while, though, it goes away.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like this addiction to technology, addiction to like this almost FOMO of like, who's reaching out to me? What am I missing out on? Yeah. And I think there's like this anxiety in that too, that not being concerned about that, being in the present is so valuable.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, just like putting everything on do not disturb, it just brings you a lot more peace. Yeah. But again, going back, I think there's one thing that I put on my radar recently, just since, shooting this wedding in New York, is I'm gonna try to intentionally spend a lot more time outdoors and maybe like rent out Airbnbs somewhere just further south, more in the mountains, just because I realize how beautiful it is when you can find and when you can just be in nature for a day or two. It just resets you in a completely different way.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think just having a space to go to that's void of all of the distractions, void of truthfully the responsibilities, and taking that Sabbath is really important.
Yeah, I love it. Hey man, one of the last questions I have for you is what is your gym routine? I always love that.
Oh, my gym routine. Okay. So
because you seem like you're in pretty good shape. For all the listeners, he's in pretty good shape. I mean, like you think of an athlete, this guy looks jacked.
Okay, so my favorite was
What's your body fat ratio? Let's go. Let's start with
gosh,
that.
I don't even know what that is at this point anymore. Although, okay, so
Yeah.
Baseball, they tell you like just eat. Okay. So I was like
Really?
probably 208, 207. And then baseball ended and I was like, okay, I'm going to try and like lose some weight. Cause I was like, I just had eaten a lot.
Yeah.
And so I went down to like 198. So I lost about 10 pounds. And then my wife was like, hey Ryan, why don't you like try and eat cleaner? And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. So she was like, why don't you try and like cut out sugar for a week? I don't even think I did a week. I think I did it like 4 days. In those 4 days, by cutting out sugar, I think I lost like 4 pounds. So I continued to reduce my sugar intake, and I've lost like another 8 pounds since then. I'm down to like 190. So
Nice.
Eating clean, so valuable. Like can't speak highly enough about that. My gym routine,
How tall are you?
like 6'1".
6'1". Yeah, 6'1", 190. That's really good.
So yeah, but my gym routine. My Mondays, I'm not lifting legs on Mondays. Just don't want to. So my Mondays are a push day, push and triceps. Tuesdays are leg days. Wednesdays are pull and biceps. Let's see. Thursdays got to be my like cardio day, but I ended up just doing like a steep incline with a walk.
Okay.
And then Friday were like a core day.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, I've heard a bunch of people use the push pull and
Legs.
Legs. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first time doing that. I've never done it that way before.
Yeah.
But I liked it. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
I think another thing that I've been really interested in doing is just a lot more calisthenics.
Okay.
Because I feel like it just tones your body and just gives you a lot more general strength that you need.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times when we go to the gym, we're just isolating very specific muscles, but we're not working on our whole body. And I think there's a value in getting like your whole body to participate in the process.
So much value in stretching too.
Yeah, absolutely. Stretching, some yoga. Man, I don't do that enough. Honestly, like when we sit, to anyone else that's listening, guys, if you're sitting, and that's 90% of us, if you're sitting on the desk all day, you really need to do some like squats. You need to do some hamstring stretches. You'll need to do some lunges. Lunges are the best, honestly, because it goes in the opposite direction than what we sit. I've actually had a lot of back problems just by sitting so much, man.
The other thing too that can really help that we don't even think about is stretching before you sleep.
Oh, really?
Really, really good for your sleep to stretch before.
How so?
It like relaxes your body. It loosens everything up. And so when you sleep, you're like more relaxed. So you get into a deeper sleep, which allows more of a REM cycle and you actually get more quality.
I love that. Get that REM, guys.
And I don't stretch as much as I should before bed, but when I do, you really notice it.
Hey man, you sound like you're doing
Habits.
a lot already. Yeah, habits though, for sure. I mean, honestly, all habits are difficult at first, but once you really once they become on autopilot, you don't think about it, and they don't take as much energy,
right?
Because they're just built.
It takes the time and the effort to build the habit, and then once the habit's built, that's when you can really enjoy it, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey man, as we were wrapping this up, is there anything that you can recommend to anyone that might be, like struggling, that maybe doesn't have enough discipline in their life, that maybe had a difficult life overall, and kind of like some of the steps that you think would be good for them to get back on their feet and become just the best person that they were meant to be in the image of God?
Yeah, I think God doesn't call any of us to small tasks. God calls us to follow him obediently and to live life to the fullest through him. And if you're struggling with habits or discipline or finding that routine, I think the first thing that I would do is pick one thing and say yes to it. And focus on that one thing. And by saying yes to that one thing, then see where things take you. Because I think when we try and, like I said, fill our cart too full, all of a sudden things become difficult and out of order and we feel overwhelmed by it. So I would say pick one thing, find a way to be disciplined in that one thing. And then when you feel like you're good with that, then move on to something else.
I love that. And I'll add to it as well. I think one of the most important things and really transformative is just like, this will go back to habits, I guess. For me, one of the things that I really like is I download the Bible app and it sends me a verse of the day. Because sometimes just, the Bible is so huge. It's a library of like 67, something like that books. It's a lot. But just having a little verse of the day that puts your mind, that's the first thing that you see. It's the first notification you get, right? I think that sets your mind in the right place. Dwelling a little bit more with God. I think just spending time with that first and foremost, going to church, all that stuff, communion, confession, all these things. And I think on top of that, like you mentioned, build really good habits. Try to do as much like gym or sports related activities as you can. I think it's really important to maybe even potentially like once a week to do like a team sport. Because I think it also helps you to also just feel like you're a part of a community, build a lot more friendships. And playing team sports will really transform you in a way that you won't believe. And it's something so beautiful. And I think, again, going back to the other piece is really habits. Start small, grow big. And that would be my 2 cents on the subject.
I love it. That's awesome.
Well, hey, Ryan, thank you so much for being on this podcast. Again, guys, for anyone that is not aware, you guys can check out his amazing podcast as well. And I'll leave the links in the show notes and everything like that. So thanks for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Artem. I appreciate it. It was fun.
All right. That's it, man.
Let's go.